What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. We have some volleyball news to go over, such as Russ Rose, the Penn State women's volleyball coach, has retired from coaching after 43 seasons with the Nittany Lions. It is unfortunate, but he had himself a fantastic career. And unfortunately, men's volleyball season this weekend is going to have to wait, as COVID, unfortunately, has canceled this weekend's games. It is a bummer, but it is what it is. We got to keep the student athletes and everyone safe. Also, we have some transfer news to go over, as it's transfer season. So set up the net, hand me a volleyball, so I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in on this beautiful Monday afternoon. I hope everyone had an amazing holidays, an amazing Christmas, an amazing whatever you celebrated. And without any further delay, let's get on into this volleyball business, as we might have a shorter show today because there's not going to be any volleyball happening right now because the NCAA women's volleyball season is over. The NCAA men's volleyball season is sadly postponed, and we have no volleyball to talk about. But we'll make do with what we've got. So let's get on into the volleyball business. But first and foremost, we have ourselves a word from our sponsors. The first sponsor for IE Sports Radio is the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get the second chance you have been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow the SoCal Warriors on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at Southern California Warriors, and on Facebook by typing in the word Southern California Warriors. The second sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Freeman take care of that for you. Kit founded and has managed Background Check International businesses since 1994, and he's here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier. This business is used for professional background checks and not for the use of any crimes such as identity theft or any other illegal activity. Unfortunately, they do not have Twitter or Instagram, but they have the Book of Faces, aka Facebook. As long as you type in the word background check, then international, then -BCI. And they have their own website, www.bcint.com. And definitely follow IE Sports Radio on Twitter and on Instagram, at IE Sports Radio on Twitter and on Instagram. And on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then the word sports, and then radio. We also have a website, and at that website, you can go to find our Patreon account, and for the last 7.5 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, or other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans for the fans, and with your help, we are ready to take the next best step. When you go to iesportsradio.com, the website for IE Sports Radio, you'll see a Patreon link, and there are 5 different tiers. The first one starts at $5 a month, which will get you a shout-out from all 30 of our shows. Higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to their podcasting university, IESRU, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment, which aired last Saturday. Thank you for supporting IE Sports Radio and help making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. Also, gotta give a quick shout to the IE Sports Radio Fan of the Month, Turban Patriot, who is the Fan of the Month for the month of October. We still have yet to get one for November. Hopefully we can get one by the time December ends. But regardless, congratulations to Turban Patriot for being the Fan of the Month for the month of October. He is a very, very down-to-earth type of guy. He spreads nothing but positive vibes all over Twitter. Even though he's a Patriots fan and a Boston fan, he's a really cool guy, and he's been an amazing judge on 3 and Out, which is basically the football show of IE Sports Radio. And he's also in the running for the IE Sports Radio Hall of Fame, which I would not be surprised if he got in, but I am rambling on. Also have to give a shout out to Bay Area Raised Apparel and Marcus Losgreat for being the Patreon supporters for IE Sports Radio, so thank you to those two. And with all that said and done, ladies and gentlemen, let's get on into the volleyball action. As last Tuesday or last week, we had Russ Rose announcing his retirement from coaching Penn State's women's volleyball team, which was very unfortunate. I kind of describe that as a volley bomb right there, as honestly, it was really surprising. As we welcome Gina G in the chat room, she says, have a great show, and Brad says, what's up, T-Rod? What a year for volleyball. Will 2022 be better? I hope so. I don't know. I'll definitely be talking about the recap of 2022 in terms of volleyball, pretty much down the road of my show. So, but back to Penn State and Russ Rose. So after 43 seasons, Penn State's women's volleyball coach, Russ Rose, has retired from coaching at Penn State. He was the longest tenured head coach, and he guided Penn State to, I believe it was 8 NCAA championships. It was either 7 or 8, but he was pretty much the godfather in terms of NCAA women's volleyball coaching. He was the Bill Belichick of women's volleyball coaching. And the fact that this news broke last week was very surprising. I was like, whoa, that was huge news right there. I could not believe it. So yeah, this news was actually delivered on last Thursday, so it's already 4 days old, but it's still rather surprising. So they've not announced a new head coach, but that new head coach has a lot of shoes to fill. And the thing about Penn State is that they lost in the round of 32 to to Pitt. They're pretty much their crosstown rival, and obviously there were some rumblings. There were some not so satisfactioned fans saying that they did not like Russ Rose. Well, not like Russ Rose, but they didn't like Russ Rose and how the team was underachieving and how they lost to certain teams and how they only got to the round of 32. But in the defense of Russ Rose, like, the Big Ten is always competitive, and Penn State lost to some pretty darn good opponents. The first one was Georgia Tech, which eventually advanced to the Elite Eight, and that team has some studs on their teams. And again, the Big Ten is legit. They had to face talented teams like Wisconsin, Ohio State, Nebraska, Minnesota. The list goes on and on. But something else that I don't think this was the reason why Russ Rose stepped down, but Penn State did have quite a number of players departing, and entering the transfer portal. Some of the players that entered the transfer portal included middle blocker Caitlin Horde, libero Jenna Hampton, outside hitter Annie Kate Fitzpatrick, and backup center Emily Other. So all in all for Penn State, this could be one of those rebuilding years. I don't want to say that too early, but honestly, it could be rebuilding season for Penn State. I can still see them being competitive, but I don't think they'll be the same as they were back in the past. So I think Penn State could struggle, but it's a little too early to look that far down the road. So I think for Penn State, they still have a bright future. They should have some good possible transfers coming in, and they still have some good possible players, incoming freshmen that'll come in, but it's going to probably be a young and rebuilding team. So we'll see how it goes for Penn State, but all in all, Russ Rose was indeed a fantastic coach, and honestly, the game's not going to be the same without him. Like, there were lots of players sounding off, lots of players and coaches, not just from the Big Ten and not just from Penn State sounding off, but other coaches and players just saying that Russ Rose was a fantastic player. And yes, he did lead Penn State to 7 NCAA women's volleyball championships. Like, lots of players sounded off on Russ Rose. I'm not going to read all of them, but some of the players included Simone Lee, Dominique Gonzalez, a former player, Ariel Wilson. The list goes on and on. Holly Rowe even sounded off, Beth Mowins, both of which are from ESPN. So all in all, everyone sounded off. Even John Cook, the Nebraska coach, sounded off on what it meant to coach against Russ Rose and whatnot. And he basically talked about the accomplishments that Russ Rose achieved in NCAA women's volleyball. And he even reminisced on some of the greatest matches that Penn State and Nebraska had. So all in all, Russ Rose, there will never be a Russ Rose. And I like what John Cook said. He said he is the GOAT, and he couldn't have said it any better. So respect to John Cook. And like I said, he is the Bill Belichick of NCAA women's volleyball. That basically, mic drop right there. Nothing more needs to be said. So anyway, that's basically my 2 cents about Russ Rose, and whoever gets the Penn State women's volleyball coaching job is going to have a lot of big shoes to fill, and they're also going to have a fairly young team and a fairly new team with a lot of players having transferred out. So Penn State will be one of the more interesting teams, to say the least, next season. I don't have a list full of candidates that could possibly take the coaching job. I mean, a few coaches that kind of come to mind, and I don't know if this coach would want to take the coaching job, is the former USC and former Texas coach, Mick Haley, but I don't know if he wants to coach anymore. I think his coaching days are kind of done, but we'll see. I was also going to recommend maybe Joy Mackenzie Furbringer, the former Long Beach State women's volleyball coach, but she has a kid. Well, she has 2 kids, and one of which is playing high school volleyball in California. So I don't think she's going to want to travel from California all the way to Pennsylvania just to get a coaching job. Maybe Matt Furbringer, but again, that's long-distance traveling, and the kids are still in high school. Now, if the kids were in college, I can understand that, but I don't see the Furbringers taking that job. But we'll see. Maybe I'll be wrong. So, all in all, it's going to be an interesting offseason for Penn State women's volleyball. So, that's pretty much that when it comes to that big volleyball news. I was really surprised by this news, and it was almost too unbelievable to believe. But it was actually true. The news was kind of first broken by Emily Eamon of the Big Ten Volley Talk. which is kind of like a sister, I wouldn't call it a sister station, but a sister volleyball content station of Set Point. But either way, she did break the news, and she is basically an NCAA volleyball personality. She even got to cover the NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship game, which, lucky her. One day Set Point will be like that. Anyway, regardless, that's pretty much the news on Russ Rose. So now that news is out of the way, let's go over some NCAA women's volleyball transfer news. So it is transfer season, and there are quite a number of players that have transferred to and from colleges. So there are a lot of players that have entered the transfer portal, and then there are players that have now found a new home. So this was courtesy of college v-ball transfers on Twitter/Instagram. They actually have a full page of players that have transferred, but for purposes of, I don't want to bore everybody from reading off every single transfer on that list. I'm just going to read off the ones that were basically notified via social media. So the first one was Caroline Muth, who transfers from Notre Dame, as she'll be transferring to Texas A&M. That's a huge get for Texas A&M, which I'm going to say this about Texas A&M. They kind of haven't been the same since 2019's team, but a talented player like Caroline Muth, who transfers from Notre Dame, is very amazing, and she has 2 years of eligibility left. So this could be the player that Texas A&M needs to get over the hump in the SEC, because the SEC is very challenging. And again, A&M hasn't had the success like Kentucky has, or Florida has, or Mississippi State had this year. So we'll see how Caroline Muth pans out for Texas A&M. The second transfer was Gabby Easton, the setter, as she transfers from Ole Miss to Virginia. It's a big get for Virginia because Virginia is in a very competitive ACC conference. Well, I said ACC and conference, but the ACC is improving and getting better. So we shall see if this transfer pans out. I think that having a setter could open up the possibility to run a 6-2 offense, or could also run the possibility of having her run the offense. So we'll see. And then there's Emma Duquette, who transfers from West Virginia to Central Michigan. I'm going to be honest, I don't know much about Central Michigan, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but it is a good get for Central Michigan, and I think she's going to make a good impact. So I'll go into if anything, I'll go into like in depth for some of these transfers. But here are the transfers that were most recent, even though like most recent from like 3 months ago. So next up we have Miranda Wirtcher, who transfers from Northern Kentucky to Minnesota. She is a setter, which is absolutely huge. I think that is a big get for the Gophers, and it makes Hugh McCutcheon's offense that much spicier. Next up, we have Alexandra Kwasnik, who transfers from Cincinnati over to James Madison, followed by Zen Benaby, who transfers from Virginia to Milwaukee. Then we have Juliana Dalton, who transfers from Washington State to Pitt. Now, this one was probably a big one for Pitt, considering they do lose Kayla Lund and a few other players to graduation. I think Lecator member Monet is a senior, and I don't know if she'll be taking that 5th year of eligibility because of COVID, but getting Juliana Dalton isn't bad. Like, she can easily mix well into the Pitt offense. So that's big for Pitt right there. Next up, we have Lindsay Miller, who transfers from Notre Dame, as she'll be transferring to the University of Southern California, aka USC. So you're going to be hearing a lot of Notre Dame players, or seeing a lot of Notre Dame players in the transfer portal. As of right now, they had 8 players currently in the transfer portal. Keep in mind that their head coach did step down, and that was big-time news right there, so changing of the guard is going to have... Changing of the guard could have an influence on that, so we'll see what happens. As Brad says, oof, don't like that one. I figured you wouldn't, so... And that is actually a big get for USC. But I'm sure... Brad was referring to the one about Juliana Dalton transferring from Washington State to Pitt. So I thought Brad was referring to Lindsey Miller transferring to USC, because USC is in the Pac-12 and whatnot. So yeah, but he says good for Pitt though. But back to the transfer action. Next up, we had Caitlin Geller as she transfers from Wyoming to Marshall. Then we have Naomi Cabello, who transfers from Texas to NC State. Now that is big because NC State has a big freshman class incoming. They also have other transfer players that are possibly going to be incoming as well. So the fact that Cabello is transferring from Texas to NC State is big time right there. And it's kind of tough for Cabello to fit into the offense. I understand because Jenna Gabriel and Nalani Yosia, and I think they had a setter from Nebraska that was in the rotation as well. So that's kind of like a three-quarterback system. It just doesn't work. So, and a three-setter system wouldn't necessarily work. So I understand Cabello transferring to NC State, but that's a big get for NC State. Then we have Marley Monserez as she transfers from Florida to UCLA to play beach volleyball, of course. So she'll be playing beach volleyball. She won't be playing indoor volleyball. Then we have Aubrey Hamilton, who transfers from Notre Dame to Marquette. That's another big get right there for Marquette. Well, another big-time player transferring from Notre Dame to Marquette. Once again, Notre Dame had 8 players transfer from their team, and it really does not help that a changing of the guard was kind of that reason. But I can't speak for that being the 100% reason, so we'll see what happens with Notre Dame. Back to the transfer portal, we have Hannah Pukis, setter, who transfers from Washington State to Oregon. So she will be still remaining in the Northwest Territory, as she'll be transferring from Washington State to Oregon, which is good stuff for the Ducks. Then we have Erica Lowry, libero, who transfers from Texas A&M to Liberty. So she goes from Power 5 school to non-Power 5 school, which is kind of cool. I think that'll be a good change of pace. Then we have a big-time transfer, Vanja Bukalic, as she transfers from Ohio State to NC State. Once again, it's another big get for NC State, considering they already got Cabello from Texas, so getting Bukalic is just as big, and I think NC State could be a surprise team in the ACC. I really think they can be. It's too early to tell, but I think they'll have potential. Now, this one was probably the biggest one. We had Zoe Fleck, a libero, transferring from UCLA to Texas. So, just as a disclaimer, some of these players are actually transferring to some of these players are transferring from their respective schools to get their masters, which is totally understandable. And then in addition, they'll be taking the 5th year to play one more year. So Zoe Fleck is a very interesting specimen that is transferring from UCLA to Texas. Keep in mind, she did actually transfer from UC Santa Barbara to UCLA, so she is taking the 5th year, but she will be playing at the University of Texas, which is absolutely big time. But this kind of begs the question, what will become of Nalani Iosia? Will she just move to the defensive specialist role? I understand Sydney Peterson was at the libero position at the time, but Zoe Fleck will be cruising her way into the libero position. And that's what's going to make Texas dangerous next year. I really think Texas has the potential to win it all. They're kind of my way too early team that is the favorite to win it. And then I also gave them the superlative and of they were best team with a bright future / returning players, and with Zoe Fleck, that's going to be big time right there. So, moving on, we have Priscilla Hernandez, libero, who is transferring from Miami of Florida to NC State. So it's another big get for NC State. So this could be NC State's dark horse here, and I don't really. It's too early to tell that if they'll win the ACC, but again, NC State is gearing up for a big year. Then we have Delaney Dilfer, who is transferring from Lipscomb to Liberty as she is a setter, followed by, I mentioned this last week, but Erica Lovett, who is transferring from my beloved Long Beach State, as she will be transferring to Tennessee. So that was a big loss right there for Long Beach State, losing her to Tennessee. But it's a big get for Tennessee as Lily Feltz is in the transfer portal. So to get Erica Lovett from Long Beach State was a huge snag. And it is heartbreaking. And I think Erica Lovett was one of the more underrated freshmen in the Big West. I think she should have been all Big West Conference freshman team. That is my take. But I think she deserved it. I kind of think she kind of got a bad rap just because Long Beach State didn't have the season everyone would hope for, but now she's going to find a great home in Tennessee. Then we have another big-time SEC transfer. We have Sophie Fisher transferring from Kentucky to Georgia. That was a big-time get, as that 6'5" giant is going to be transferring to Bulldog Country, as she'll be transferring to Georgia, which I kind of am interested to see if that'll pan out, but I think it could. Georgia did not have a great season, but we'll see if the Bulldogs can get back on top. So there's that. Then we have Riley Daniel, middle blocker, transferring from Portland State to Northwestern State. Then we have Caroline Crawford, a middle blocker, transferring from Kansas to Wisconsin. That is big time right there. It gives Wisconsin another middle blocker to work with, as they won't have to bank on Anna Smrek and Devin Robinson, as Robinson can play her opposite position, which is her secondary position, and then Caroline Crawford can play middle along with Anna Smrek, as Caroline Crawford transfers from Kansas to Wisconsin, which is very huge right there. I will be interested to see how this pans out, and I think this will work tenfold for the Badgers. Then we have Grace Ballenseifer as she transfers from Northern Illinois to Purdue. So Haley Bush does graduate from Purdue this year, but getting Ballenseifer is big time for the Boilermakers. They also get another big-time player somewhere down the road, so just be patient with me. But getting Grace is big for Purdue, as that solves their setter problem. But we'll see if another setter wants to challenge her. Then another setter transferring to a Power 5 conference, as Raquel Lazaro is transferring from USC, as she'll be transferring to Louisville, which is big news considering Tori Dilfer is graduating. So the fact that Raquel Lazaro lost her starting position to Mia Tuaniga means that she wants to take that last year of eligibility and possibly win a national championship. Because prior to Tuaniga arriving at USC, Lazaro was the starting setter. Unfortunately, she lost that position to Tuaniga, so Lazaro transferring to the ACC is big-time news for the Cardinals, as that gives them another option to work with offensively. And I believe that... Oh no, we have plenty more. We have plenty more where that came from. So next up we have Claire Ox, who transfers from Southeast Missouri to Jacksonville State, as she is a setter. It's a big time get right there. Then we have Michelle Schaefer, who will be staying in the West Coast Conference, as she'll be transferring from Santa Clara to Loyola Marymount University. So she'll be going from NorCal to SoCal, which is cool, I guess. So she is a setter and opposite, by the way. And then another interconference transfer occurred, as Reagan Riley, a setter, will be transferring from North Dakota State to South Dakota State, which is quite the interesting transfer right there. So I'm surprised she's still staying in conference, but I guess she just wanted to stay within that area or within that conference. Either way, South Dakota State versus North Dakota State is going to be even more interesting. Then we have Lacey Jeffcoat, who is transferring from Troy to Mississippi State, so she'll be staying down south as she'll be transferring from the Sun Belt Conference to the SEC. Then we have Chelsea Harmon, who is transferring from Portland to Auburn, so she goes from West Coast Conference to SEC. So the middle blocker has found a home with the Tigers. Then we have Emily Brown, who is transferring from Missouri to Purdue. She is a libero. This was the other big-time transfer that Purdue got, as this definitely fills in the role for Jenna Otek, who graduates. So that's big time right there for Purdue. For Missouri, it's just another player that they lost to the transfer portal, as they have been hit hard in terms of players that have transferred, as they lost Lecator member Monet to Pitt after she opted out last season. They also lost Kylie DeBerg to LSU, as she'll be playing beach volleyball there as well. And now they lose Emily Brown, their libero, to Purdue. So Missouri is just in a midst of a major rebuild and rehaul. So we'll see if the Mizzo Tigers can bounce back. Then we have Jaden Ravensborg, as she transfers from Kansas State to Arizona State. So she goes from Big 12 to Pac-12, which is cool stuff. Then we have Zaina Meyer, who transfers from BYU to Long Beach State. This was an interesting transfer, as her older brother Zio is currently on the BYU men's volleyball team. So the fact that she's transferring to Long Beach State means one of two things. She wasn't getting playing time, or she just wants to come home. Or maybe both. Regardless, this is kind of an interesting transfer, because you look at the setter position that Long Beach State has. They have Tia Chavira, and then they have, and then they have another setter, Keisha Partika, that's her name. Keisha Partika at setter, and then they have a defensive specialist who plays setter a little bit as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Zaina Meyer fits into that setter position for Long Beach State. I think she can do it, but she'll have to earn her stripes, especially since she has 4 years of eligibility left, and she'll be coming on a Long Beach State team that just recently hired Tyler Hildebrand from Nebraska. And they also have a lot of players coming back next year, such as Kashana Williams. Back to the transfer news, we have Maggie Jones transferring from NC State to DePaul. So this was one of the players that NC State lost to the transfer portal, but getting Bukalic and Cabello is a big-time get for NC State. So I think this one was kind of a blip on the radar. But I think this will be a transfer that NC State will survive without. Then we have Madison Frabel, who is a setter who transfers from Butler to Portland State. So she'll be going from the Big East to the West Coast Conference. Then we have Ari Winters, who is staying within the Summit League, as she'll be transferring from Denver to Omaha. So bit of change of scenery right there, but still staying in the Summit League, which is interesting stuff. Then we have Anna Calcagno, as she transfers from Marshall to Western Michigan. So the Broncos will be getting an outside hitter, which is good stuff. Then we have Jordan Gates, who is transferring from Arkansas to Grand Valley State, which is quite interesting. I didn't even think that school would get her, but that's really interesting. So tough loss for Arkansas, but Arkansas is in a competitive SEC, and also Arkansas was improving, and I guess she just didn't want to be a part of the improvement or the rebuild, so there's that right there for Jordan Gates. And then we had, as of today, Caddy Boyer transferring from Texas Tech to Denver. So she goes from the Lone Star State to the Rocky Mountain State. So interesting stuff right there. And then we have Bryn Whitehair, who transfers from Marshall to College of Charleston. So that's another transfer right there. And then we had just recently, we had Ellie Schrader, who is transferring from San Diego, as she'll be transferring to San Diego State, which is rather interesting. I am very surprised she is going from inner city rivalry to another inner city rivalry. So I am rather intrigued about this. Like, San Diego State didn't have the best season, as San Diego clearly won their matchup against San Diego State, but the fact that Ellie Schrader is transferring from San Diego to San Diego State is really going to make this rivalry interesting. Schrader did get playing time as a freshman, but this year was kind of a little different. But so I'm still interested about this. So we'll see if Schrader can pan out with the Aztecs. So that was pretty much that right there. I could have gone through the entire list of transfers, but I did not want to, just for purposes of I did not want to have story time with the transfer portal. So if there are any other big transfers, I will let you all know, but that is pretty much that for the transfer news. So Brad did make note of 2 transfers leaving Wazoo. He says interesting. Yeah, it is kind of interesting, but I think Wazoo returns most of its players. So I think Washington State is going to be just fine. They did win an NCAA tournament game this year. They did lose in the round of 32 to Baylor, but Baylor is a strong team. So all in all, I think Washington State will be fine. And then to answer his question about volleyball and what will 2022 be better, I think it will. But let's actually recap. I was gonna save the recap of 2022 for the second part of the show, but I think we can go over the women's volleyball of 2021. So, recapping all volleyball of 2021, we had a lot of amazing history made. First and foremost, we had 2 NCAA women's volleyball champions becoming first-time champions, as we had Kentucky winning in the spring, which, for those that don't know, the 2020 season was moved from the fall of 2020 to the spring of 2021 due to COVID. And then a few months later, they had the fall of the NCAA women's volleyball season of 2021, as that started in August, if not September, and it eventually went through December. So for the 2021 season, we had Wisconsin winning its first NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship, which was very impressive. The Badgers had to grind it out against a tough Nebraska team, but they were able to pull it out in the end. The seniors, such as Dana Retke, Sydney Hilly, Lauren Barnes, Grace Loberg, Danielle Hart, despite her having a season-ending injury, and Gio Savita all went out on top. It was much more special for Dana Retke, as she became a 5-time All-American and a 2-time National Player of the Year. So it was rather impressive that Wisconsin finally was able to pull out the NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship after they had lost it the previous 3 tries, as they lost it back in 2000 when they lost to Nebraska, then they lost to Penn State in 2013, and then they lost it in 2019 as they got swept by Stanford. So the 4th time was the charm, and again, I'm happy for all those seniors that came back for their 5th year. So good stuff for Wisconsin. And then as for Kentucky, it was very special seeing them win their NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship for the first time. They became the first the SEC team to win an NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship, and I feel bad for Tennessee fans just because they are rivals of Kentucky, but I feel happy for Kentucky making history. So all in all, for Kentucky, it was a great spring season, and for Wisconsin, it was a great fall/winter season. The NCAA women's volleyball, nationally televised, did not disappoint. I just wish they would televise more, especially when it came to the fall of 2021. I think there should have been more televised games. They should have televised at least one match of the Elite Eight. I'm not going to go on that rant again, just because I've basically said what I've needed to say about that a couple weeks ago. So, all in all, it was great for NCAA women's volleyball in terms of the college action. As we say hello to Davidson Crooks, who pops in the chat room, he says, "What's good?" Everything's going good, and I am just recapping all things women's volleyball and all things volleyball in general. So, recapping the NCAA men's volleyball portion from 2021, we had Hawaii winning theoretically its first non-sanctioned NCAA men's volleyball championship as they swept BYU. They almost completed a perfect season, but unfortunately they fell in the Big West Conference tournament semifinals to UC San Diego. However, the Rainbow Warriors did get the number 1 seed, and they eventually just dominated their way to winning the NCAA men's volleyball championship of 2021. The 2020 season was unfortunately canceled, but Hawaii made the most of its opportunities as Rado Parupanov went out on top. And I still have my little recording of Charlie Wade, but I'm going to be saving that for another bit, for later on in the show. But you all have heard it. It's basically on my Twitter account. It's the pinned tweet at the top. So back to Hawaii, it was very special for them because they kind of were the Chicago Cubs of NCAA men's volleyball. They hadn't won an NCAA championship, and yet they finally broke through. Even after they lost to UC San Diego, it was really incredible that they were able to just break through. They even took down a talented BYU team. So that's basically how Hawaii won the NCAA men's volleyball championship. And then also we had USC getting back on top in terms of the beach volleyball scene as they upended their rival UCLA in the championship match. The fun thing about the NCAA the NCAA beach volleyball championship was that the top 3 teams were all from Southern California. USC, UCLA, and LMU, which is Loyola Marymount University. So I'm sorry to all the other schools that didn't have a team from Southern California that didn't make it into the top 3, but c'est la vie. But LMU was kind of the breakout team. Like, it would have been incredible to see them going toe-to-toe with USC. Like, the fact that they were able to beat UCLA was incredible. It's unbelievable. The fact that they also won their first West Coast Conference championship in beach volleyball, dethroning Pepperdine, was also unbelievable as well. So, LMU is on the rise, y'all. And I actually do have a friend that plays on LMU, so it's going to be good stuff right there. So, doesn't mean that UCLA and USC and Stanford and all the other teams will be back. They definitely will be back next season. And beach season will be rather incredible. So, yeah, it was rather a fun NCAA beach volleyball season, and USC was able to get back on top. So, there was that. So jumping on over to the NVA, the National Volleyball Association, this was my first ever season that I gave it its own spotlight. It did have to share the spotlight with the NCAA men's volleyball season, the NCAA beach volleyball season, and the NCAA women's volleyball season, but I did have time to give the NVA their own spotlight, as the NVA was basically in its 3rd season. And this is the National Volleyball Association, not the NBA, the NVA. So this was basically in its 3rd season, as it basically had its 2nd inaugural championship, as the Orange County Stunners were able to stun their way to the championship game, and they eventually won the championship game over the Las Vegas Ramblers. It was rather impressive considering that team started 0-3 and they were decimated with injuries. However, they were able to turn the tables around. They were able to win their way through the first round and eventually win their way to the championship. So it was rather incredible. And big shout out to former Set Point guest Nick Amato, who basically was on that Orange County Stunners championship team. So great stuff for the Orange County Stunners, and I look forward to seeing if they'll be able to defend their title. By the way, another big moment from 2021 in terms of the NVA. The NVA got another NVA team, as they now have the Colorado Kraken. So that's 11 teams if we're all keeping score in terms of the NVA. I don't know if they'll be adding a 12th team, but it would be cool to add a 12th team. Give it like a little bit more of an even Steven feel and not have that odd feel. So there's that right there. And then jumping over to Olympic volleyball, we had 3 teams from USA clinch gold. First and foremost, we had the women's beach volleyball team from USA clinch gold, as April Ross and Alex Kleinman both were able to win their way to the gold medal match, and they eventually won the gold medal match, which there was no surprise. Like Alex Kleinman and April Ross were known as the A team for a reason, and they also won 2 AVP tournaments, which was quite incredible. They didn't participate in the first one just because Alex Kleinman had a bit of a minor injury, but they eventually got back on their horse, and they eventually were able to win their way. So for April Ross and Alex Kleinman, it was very special because April Ross had been with 3 different partners. She had been with Misty May Trainer, and then Jen Kessie, and then... Oh, I'm sorry, she wasn't with Misty May Trainer. She was with Jen Kessie, Carrie Walsh Jennings, and then Alex Kleinman. So the fact that April Ross finally broke through was quite amazing for April Ross. She is now one of few players to have a bronze, silver, and gold medal in volleyball, or in any sport. So it's incredible. So she's got the triple medal. And Alex Kleinman won her first gold medal, or her first medal in general, as an Olympic athlete. So good for those two. And once again, they're the A team for a reason. That team is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. So there was that. The second gold medal that came from the United States in terms of volleyball was sitting volleyball. So sitting volleyball is very different than actual volleyball standing up. It's super different. And the fact that the U.S. won gold medal in that was also unbelievable. I do know that the U.S. has a very talented that the U.S. has a very talented sitting volleyball team, and that they were able to dominate for the most part. They did lose a match along the way, but they were able to win their way to the gold medal match, and I want to say they beat Brazil. I'm not entirely certain. I apologize, but they did win their gold medal match. It was a rematch of the opponent that defeated them, so good stuff for the U.S. women's sitting team. And then the last team that won gold medal in terms of volleyball was the U.S. women's national team, the indoor team. So this team had not won a gold medal in its history, as they had either finished second, they had finished third, they had finished fourth, they had either not qualified, etc., etc., etc. And this is something I didn't know. I did not know their head coach, Karch Karai, had cancer. I think it was pancreatic cancer, but the fact that I did not know this, then the fact that he did not say anything until this came out, was just absolutely a shocker. So the fact that the U.S. finally broke through, and the best part was they defeated Brazil, who was absolutely on a tear when it came to the Olympics, when it came to women's volleyball. Like, they had not lost a match, and they were practically indestructible. That team wasn't losing at any point a whole lot in terms of the Olympics in women's volleyball. So, all in all, the fact that the U.S. not only beat Brazil, they swept Brazil, speaks to high volumes of how the U.S. was able to overcome a lot of odds, a lot of adversity, because they had a few players dinged up, they lost a few players to injury, and they had to make some new rotations, and then they had to have some players basically step up, such as Annie Drews, and Jordan Larson had to step up, and heck, we even got to see Micah Hancock come in at setter. So, all in all, that was a big, big moment for the U.S. women's national indoor team. I was very impressed at some of the adversity they had overcome. They had even lost in one of their matches in straight sets, but that was one of the matches they lost one of their players in. And that was Jordan Thompson that they lost their player in. And then, unfortunately, she didn't really get to see the court a whole lot after her injury, even though she had been fully healed up. However, it did pave the way for a new rotation, and eventually the U.S. won their first gold medal in women's indoor volleyball. So, great stuff for the U.S., and I think that's pretty much all the noteworthy, memorable volleyball moments. One more moment that did happen in the volleyball world in 2021 was that Marymount High School, a private school from Los Angeles, California, finished a perfect 35-0 as I don't even know who was the last team to go undefeated in terms of a national championship. I want to say maybe it was Assumption, but I'm not going to make that assumption. But it was incredible that Marymount was able to go undefeated, and I want to say they lost like 10 sets all season long. 10 sets, and not one of those matches went best of 5 or went to a decisive set. Basically, best 2 out of 3, they swept all those matches, and then best 3 out of 5, not one of those matches went to a 5th set. So, Marymount was indeed a very talented team this season, and they had some stud players like Elia Rubin, and I think her name was like Kelly Stafford, I want to say. It was something Stafford. But regardless, those two are heading to Stanford to play, as Rubin will be playing indoor, and then Stafford will be playing outdoor. And then Carrie Keefe was also a key member of that Marymount team. She'll be playing volleyball at Duke. So I was very impressed that that team finished 35-0, undefeated, and is going to be the national champion. There's no debate that that team is going to be national champion in terms of girls volleyball, as I don't see any other team making another claim that they are better than that team. In terms of this year, of course. Like, there'll be other like fans saying, well, this team in this year was better than that team in this year, or any of that sort. But I think this year's 2021 Marymount team is absolutely amazing, and they are indeed national champions. And I think that team should have gotten a lot more notoriety, as that team basically, it's so tough to keep an undefeated season, as Louisville demonstrated that the hard way. Gonzaga men's basketball learned that the hard way last year. Wisconsin women's volleyball learned that the hard way last year. It's so tough to keep an undefeated season through the playoffs. It just really is, especially when the pressure starts to get to you. But this Marymount team was just something else. So that was also another small but impressive moment of volleyball in terms of the 2021 calendar year. But I don't know what 2022 is going to bring. Hopefully, it won't bring a whole lot more COVID, even though we do have some news to share in terms of that, but that'll be shared in the second half part of the show. We'll take ourselves a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more volleyball talk, as I'll be discussing some men's volleyball, and then I'll be discussing Set Point's memorable moments from 2021 as well. So you are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
From the shores of the Puget Sound to the rushing waters of the Columbia River, stretching across the Great Cascades, and on IE Sports Radio lives the Northwest Territory Sports Show, hosted by me, Brad Buckingham. On this show, I cover all the great collegiate and professional sport teams that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks, Seattle Mariners, Sounders, and even the Seattle Kraken. But I can't forget all of that is good in Oregon either. I got the Trailblazers, the Oregon Ducks, the Beavers, even the Timbers, and much, much more. You can listen to the show every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' to NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
And welcome back to the second half of Set Point. We are in segment number 2, as this is the last segment of the 2021 calendar year. Big surprise. Where is the time gone, ladies and gentlemen? So without any further delay, let's get on into segment number 2. Let's jump into some men's volleyball. So the men's volleyball season was supposed to start this Saturday, as UC Irvine was going to travel to Loyola of Chicago to take on the Ramblers. Unfortunately, and this is a big, unfortunately, UC Irvine's men's volleyball team put out this statement at about, I believe it was 10:12 a.m. So they put out this statement earlier in the day. Due to the surge of Omicron variant and in an abundance of caution for the well-being of the student, athletes, and staff, the matches at Loyola University of Chicago on January 1st and Lewis on January 2nd have been canceled. The Anteaters' next scheduled matches are January 7th against Lindenwood and January 8th versus Stanford at the Burnham Pavilion and Ford Center on the Stanford campus. So they basically their season opener is canceled, which I'm a little bummed about this. This was going to be the battle of obviously Chicago and UC Irvine were going to be not Chicago and UC Irvine. Loyola of Chicago and UC Irvine were going to be the battle of two top 10 teams. Well, two top 15 teams, as UC Irvine was 12th while Loyola was 7th, and then UC Irvine was going to play Lewis the following day, as Lewis is number 8th in the preseason coaches poll. So, yeah, Brad, it really does suck. And yes, Uncle COVID sadly strikes again. And it seems like COVID is kicking every league's butt when it comes to canceling and postponing games. In terms of not just, I wouldn't say in terms of canceling and postponing games. Canceling and postponing games in terms of the NCAA, as they're canceling bowl games, they're canceling men's and women's basketball games, they're canceling high school games. It's ridiculous. It's even getting to the point where they're postponing NFL games. It is ridiculous. And I'm just going to say this. Please, everybody, please stay safe. We're living in a crazy world. Just take care of your bodies. Make sure, if you can, try to get vaccinated. It really will make you go a long way. I know some people are squeamish of needles. I know people don't want to put that stuff in their body, but it is going to help you in the long run. I'm not going to try to get too much into that stuff, but do whatever you can. So that means there's no men's volleyball this weekend, which really sucks. We got to wait till next week to preview matches. Fortunately, there will be a lot of NCAA men's volleyball matches to go over next week, and it's going to be quite the fun little preview show, as I think men's volleyball, and I don't mean to say this in a negative way, excuse me for a second. I don't mean to say this in a negative way. I think men's volleyball deserves a little bit more notoriety or more recognition. I know it's not as recognized as women's volleyball, in my opinion. None of their matches are nationally televised. You have to be a member of the Pac-12 network. You have to basically be a member of ESPN Plus, which I am not a part of, and I don't like that. And then sometimes the Big Ten will have men's volleyball matches when Ohio State and Penn State face one another, but that's only on a once-in-a-blue moon. That's when the Big Ten network is going to televise those matches. But I think men's volleyball deserves a little bit more love. Just my opinion. At least televise or nationally televise the championship game, if not the semifinals. I remember when it came to the semifinals from last year, everyone was flocking over to the live stream, and that slowed down the live stream, and it eventually forced the live stream to go absolutely haywire. So that was a bit of an inconvenience. So please, 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 ESPN, nationally televise the semifinals, if not the final. Put it on ESPN or ESPN2. Don't give us this bologna sausage of ESPN Plus or ESPN News. Give us the nationally televised station, or at least put it on ESPN3. Anyway, that's just my little rant. But unfortunately, there are no NCAA men's volleyball matches this weekend. There will be next weekend. However, we did get a little bit of the Big West Conference preseason coaches poll, and this is kind of the juggernaut conference. This is the conference that cannot that has a lot of good, legit teams. And this is a conference that could, hence the word could, have a lot of possible champions. This could possibly have a lot of teams making the NCAA tournament. So the Big West Conference men's volleyball coaches poll has Cal State Northridge finishing 6th, as this is only a 6-team conference. There is no Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. There is no Cal State Bakersfield. There is no UC Riverside. There's none of those teams, unfortunately. But back to the men's volleyball coaches poll. CSUN, or Cal State Northridge, is slated to finish 6th. UC Irvine and UC Santa Barbara are slated to finish tied for 4th in the Big West Conference. Then UC San Diego is slated to finish 3rd in the Big West Conference coaches poll. And then at 2nd, I kind of gave it away, for 2nd in the Big West Conference is actually a tie, as there's actually a tie for atop of the preseason coaches poll in the Big West Conference, as Long Beach State and Hawaii are both dead even in terms of points, as Long Beach State and Hawaii both totaled 21 points, as both teams are favored to win the Big West Conference championship, and that's going to be a lit game. That game is going to be legit. I am really looking forward to that game. I cannot wait to see how those matches pan out against Hawaii and Long Beach State men's volleyball. And it's going to be huge. Like those two matches will be played at Long Beach in the Pyramid, which that's big news for Long Beach State, as they won't have to travel to the Big Island. They won't have to adapt to whatchamacallit. They won't have to adapt to playing in a different time zone. They won't have to adapt to playing against the opposing team's fans. The best part is that it's actually, those matches between Long Beach State and Hawaii are actually sooner rather than later, as both those matches are going to be the 3rd and 4th matches that Long Beach State and Hawaii face one another, as those two will be playing each other on April 1st and April 2nd, which is a Friday and a Saturday. And that's going to be big time right there. So I really hope everything gets panned out. I really hope that fans will get to be allowed to attend this event. I also really hope that this doesn't get postponed, or I hope that the NCAA men's volleyball season doesn't get canceled. I just really hope that everything gets safe and sound. Actually, this will be the 5th and the 6th matchup for Long Beach State, as Long Beach State will play UC Irvine to kick off the Big West Conference, and then they'll play UC Santa Barbara, and then they'll play Hawaii. Then they'll follow it up with with 2 matches against UC San Diego, and then they'll follow it up with playing Cal State Northridge on the last week of Big West Conference play. So interesting stuff right there, as I can see it now. Long Beach State does get a bye week after their first week of Big West Conference play against UC Irvine. And during that week, Long Beach State will be playing Concordia. So the thing I don't like about Long Beach State's matches is that their times are so, I hate how their matches are at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. It's an inconvenience for me, because unfortunately I can't really go to those matches because I don't drive and buses don't really run that late. So we'll have to see if I can make do on possibly getting to those Hawaii matches. So we'll see. By the way, something to note is that the Big West Conference tournament will be held in Hawaii, which is big-time news for Hawaii fans, just because Hawaii is such a tough place to win at. The Stan Sheriff Center is a freaking amazing tough place to win at, and it's basically something of kind of a home court advantage for Hawaii. I don't think it's fair, but at the same time, I respect it, and it is what it is. I think the last 3 tournaments have been played at Hawaii. Last year, it was played at Hawaii. 2019, it was played at Hawaii. And I think 2018 was played at Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken. So it's the past 4 seasons. So that's rather interesting. Maybe they're having the Big West Conference at Hawaii for the time being until the next rotation. But I'm not going to judge. I don't know what that's all about, but it is what it is, and I will not complain. I will not say anything, so be it. Actually, 2018 was held at Long Beach State. It wasn't held at Hawaii, so there's that right there. So cool beans right there. So that's pretty much that for Big West Conference. Once again, there wasn't too much to talk about in terms of NCAA men's volleyball, just because Uncle COVID did strike, as Brad said. But there will be a lot more NCAA men's volleyball talk going forward. And then eventually there will be NCAA beach volleyball talk, as I imagine that season will be starting in February, and then eventually the NVA will start. And there will be a lot of volleyball, so there will be a volleyball purge. And then the summer we'll have the AVP, and then previews of the NCAA women's volleyball season. And then the NCAA women's volleyball season will be back in the fall of 2022. And then we'll start the cycle all over again. So, yeah, that's how Set Point revolves when it comes to the world of volleyball. Anyway, so on that note, before we close out the show, this is the last episode of 2021. So just want to give a little bit of a reflection of Set Point and what accomplishments it had. So for starters, Set Point eclipsed 100 episodes. I never thought, if you had told me Set Point was going to be eclipsing 100 episodes back when I did this on September 30th, 2019, I would have looked at you crazy and said, that's not going to happen. But eventually it did. Even though COVID became a thing, the 2020 volleyball seasons got canceled, and the women's season eventually got moved to 2021 in the spring, we eventually kept Set Point going. Like, I had to be creative when it came to keeping Set Point going. So the fact that I was able to surpass 100 episodes was absolutely amazing. It was quite surprising, and I am very proud of myself. And I was able to have a big time show when it came to Set Point. I had 4 guests. Well, I had 2 at the same time, and then eventually I had the head coach of TJ DeFalco, and then I eventually had a Stanford play-by-play announcer. Stanford play-by-play announcer in terms of like radio and whatnot. So either way, I'm very happy that Set Point surpassed 100 episodes. I'm also happy that Set Point got to continue to stay on the air for 2 years. It celebrated its 2-year anniversary on September 30th, 2021. And I did have to move that around. I had to move it to Thursday at 2 p.m., which was kind of awkward just because the NFL was playing that day, which really was a bummer. But I had to have Set Point on September 30th because that was when Set Point first originated. And it's basically like celebrating a birthday. So it's quite amazing. And then another memorable moment for Set Point was that Set Point never once took a week off in terms of its show not being on the air. So honestly, and that one is kind of a testament to how consistent Set Point is. Yes, I've had to move Set Point from different time to different time to different day, but I never once canceled Set Point for a certain week. And I don't know. I just had the sudden urge to keep Set Point going. And I don't know what it was, but I really think that Set Point deserved to continue to go. And I was able to find volleyball content to talk on, even though it sometimes kind of was, even though it wasn't really like noteworthy, but it was like volleyball content to talk about. whether it was schedule breakdowns, whether it's transfer news, whether it was AVP, like Set Point just continued to go, and I continue to find inklings of things to talk about in terms of Set Point, even in the off seasons, even after the NVA had concluded and the AVP was put on pause because of the Olympics, which hadn't even started yet. So all in all, it's really astounding. And Brad says those are some awesome accomplishments. Definitely should be proud. Facts right there, Brad. And I am proud of those accomplishments. And my goal for this year in terms of Set Point is I want to make Set Point become a household name. I want it to be as big as some of these other volleyball shows or podcasts. I think Set Point is big, or can be bigger than some of these other volleyball shows. It's just all about me putting my name out there. Because as my buddy Marcus Losgreat once said, a house is never built overnight. And it is going to take time for Set Point to have that notoriety or that recognition from some of these big-time networks, or not big-time networks, but like big-time like listeners or whatnot. But if I'm able to like spread the word about Set Point and talk about it, then Set Point won't be a tree falling down in the woods where no one can hear it. Set Point eventually will be heard around the world, and I will make sure of that, because I definitely do think Set Point has that potential to be as good as some of these other volleyball shows. And Brad says, I don't know who else is doing as much volleyball as you. The recognition will come. Thanks, Brad. And I will be patient. Like, sometimes you gotta have patience, and obviously there are other volleyball shows and other volleyball podcasts, such as Six Rotations, Big Ten Volley Talk, the Viral Volleyball Podcast, I think that's what it's called. Like, those are a few to name, but I eventually will be amongst one of the top volleyball content in terms of the world. And I'll eventually get better. I'll eventually try to like preview things better, and I'll try to sharpen off the rough edges. And that's basically my New Year's resolution for Set Point, and I will make sure Set Point becomes a household name. And on that note, I think that's going to do it for the final episode of 2021 of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last time in 2021, it is time to drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I really, really do appreciate you all tuning in. If you listened live, I appreciate you. If you listened on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listened at work, I appreciate you. If you listened in the wee hours of the morning, I appreciate you. And if you ever supported Set Point in any way, shape, or form, I really, really do appreciate you. Big shout to the chat room. Thank you to Gina G for popping in. Thank you to Brad Buckingham for popping in. Thank you to Davidson Crooks that popped in for a little bit. I appreciate you all. And yes, Gina, I will see you in 2022. And thank you for the recognition. And thank you for being a loyal supporter of Set Point. You too, Brad. And I appreciate you all. I appreciate everyone who has supported Set Point to this coming day. I promise you Set Point in 2022 is going to be big time. I'll make sure of it, even if I have to prepare well in advance. I already know Set Point has big things coming up. I'll try to get more guests. I'll try to make sure that Set Point is a household name. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourselves a great rest of the week. Have a great new year. Please, please, please be safe. Please take care of your bodies. If you can, try to get vaccinated, because we're living in a crazy world. And I will see you on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great week, everybody. Peace!